No animals or senior adults were put at risk during the making of this program. But conflicts between pedestrians, especially senior pedestrians and bicyclists, can lead to serious injuries. When noticing bicyclists and pedestrians sharing space, remember that the senior pedestrians' reaction times and injury recovery times are slower, making conflicts more possible and much more serious.
Hello, 911.
Dixie, you're not going to believe this, but we're following up on a call about an unidentified life form, which is reported to be suspended on an object that is barely touching the ground. She says that the vehicle's contact with the pavement is about the width of 2 thumbnails.
What kind of life form? What type of vehicle?
She says it's a really quick and quiet vehicle, and the life form is still unidentified.
For a minute there, they had me wondering. But there's nothing dangerous about someone on a bicycle. It's as safe and American as apple pie. Isn't it? We Americans do love our baseball, apple pie, and bicycles. All of us, young and old alike, enjoy that healthy, non-polluting, free-feeling way to get around. But driving a bicycle is a serious undertaking, and bikes are not toys. Bikes can cost up to $6,000 or more. And operating a bicycle is not child's play. In fact, bicycles are legal vehicles. They are a legal part of road traffic and subject to the same general traffic rules as motorized road users.
But bicyclists are not motorists. They have little protection compared to other roadway users, are less conspicuous, and are not licensed. Since only some schools provide on-bicycle traffic safety training, and cyclists are not required to pass an examination, street cyclists tend to vary widely in their abilities. In recent years, the state of Florida has consistently recorded some of the highest annual rates of bicyclist fatalities in the U.S.
But when people obey traffic rules, lives are saved, and that's where we as law enforcement officers come in. When we know what to enforce, we can help prevent crashes and injuries and literally save lives. The Florida Bicycle Law Enforcement Guide is a handy review of bicycle traffic laws to help you with warnings, citations, and crash reports. It's based on Florida's Uniform Traffic Control Law in Chapter 316 of the Florida Statutes and provides a quick and easy reference to regulations. Here are a few of its highlights.
Upon all roadways of sufficient width, a vehicle must be driven on the right half of the road. This means a cyclist should drive with traffic. Wrong-way riding is the single largest cause of bicycle motor vehicle crashes. It puts the bicyclist in a place where no vehicle is expected. Sometimes it seems more convenient not to have to cross the street, and some cyclists ride facing traffic to avoid being struck from behind. However, hit from behind crashes are rare, and riding against traffic increases the risk of crashes at intersections and driveways by 2 to 4 times. It is extremely important for bicyclists to be well lit when driving at night. All vehicles are required to have lights. A front white light and a rear red light and reflector are the absolute minimum for safe nighttime riding. Unfortunately, unlike automobiles, bicycles do not come with the lighting equipment to make them street legal at night, and many cyclists who ride at night think that if they can see other drivers, the drivers can see them. More than half the bicyclists killed in Florida were riding between sunset and sunrise, and many of them were not using the required lights and reflectors. Bicyclists must obey traffic signals just like motorists, and they must obey traffic signs and pavement markings. A cyclist on a roadway who is not traveling as fast as the normal speed of traffic must ride as close as practicable to the right-hand curb or edge of the roadway. Cyclists need to ride far enough from the edge to avoid gutter seams, pavement lips, gutter debris, drain covers, and the like, without swerving or losing control. It's safer to ride in a predictable straight line. A bicyclist may leave the rightmost portion of the roadway in the following situations: when going the speed of other traffic, when passing another vehicle, when making a left turn, when it is necessary to avoid hitting a fixed or moving object, a parked or moving vehicle, a pedestrian, an animal, or a surface hazard, and where a lane is too narrow for a bicyclist and another vehicle to share safely side by side, it is legal and safe for a cyclist to take the lane where the lane is too narrow for another vehicle to pass. The recommended minimum clearance for passing a bicyclist is 3 feet. Since the total width of larger motor vehicles with extending mirrors is commonly 8 feet or more, a lane with less than 14 feet of usable width is usually too narrow for motorized traffic to pass a cyclist. Where restricted conditions do not leave room for bicycle lanes or paved shoulders on a multi-lane roadway, the Florida Department of Transportation recommends an outside lane width of 14 feet so that motorists can safely pass bicyclists without going into the next lane. A cyclist intending to go straight at an intersection should not ride in a lane marked exclusively for right turns. They should stay in the travel lane. On a one-way street with 2 or more traffic lanes, a cyclist may drive as close to the left-hand edge of the road as practical. Where a curb is not present, the right-hand edge of a road serves as the boundary between the roadway and the shoulder. Since the definition of roadway does not include the shoulder, cyclists are not required to drive on paved shoulders, although they may prefer to do so. However, a cyclist may ride only along a right side paved shoulder traveling in the direction of traffic. Cyclists riding 2 abreast may not impede traffic when traveling at less than the normal speed of traffic, and they must do so within a single lane. Where a lane is too narrow for a motor vehicle and a single cyclist to share, though, riding 2 abreast is legal because it causes no additional impediment to traffic. In this case, safe passing requires use of the next lane. Remember, vehicle travel lane sizes can differ from about 8 feet to 16 feet for a single lane. A bicyclist needs at least 5 feet of travel lane to be safe from the impacts of passing vehicles. One close pass can often send the bicyclist into an out-of-control situation and towards serious injury. Cyclists may not ride more than 2 abreast, except on paths or parts of roads set aside for the exclusive use of bicycles. A cyclist intending to make a left turn is entitled to the full use of the lane from which a driver may legally make a left turn. However, instead of making a vehicular left turn, a cyclist may proceed through the rightmost portion of the intersection and turn as close to the curb or edge as practical at the far side. Before proceeding in the new direction of travel, the cyclist must comply with any official traffic control signal or sign. Cyclists must indicate their intention to turn during the last 100 feet traveled before turning. If a cyclist needs both hands for control, the signal need not be given continuously. In Florida, a bicyclist right turn signal can be indicated with the left hand extending up at a right angle, or with the right hand extended straight. Overtaking on the right is permitted on a street or highway where the pavement is not obstructed or occupied by parked vehicles, where there is sufficient width for 2 or more lines of moving traffic in each direction, and conditions are safe to do so. When riding on a sidewalk or crosswalk, cyclists have the same rights and duties as pedestrians. Therefore, they are permitted to ride in either direction. However, riding against traffic on a sidewalk substantially increases the risk of collision with motor vehicles at driveways and intersections. All bicycle regulations which do not pertain specifically to roadway operation apply on sidewalks. For example, the requirement to use lights after sunset and the laws about bicycle helmets and carrying passengers. In many cities, riding on sidewalks in central business districts is prohibited by local ordinance. Since sidewalk cycling is generally less safe than roadway cycling, enforcing this law benefits both cyclists and pedestrians. When approaching a signalized intersection from a sidewalk, a cyclist must obey the instructions of any applicable pedestrian control signal. That is, he may start to cross the roadway only during the steady walk phase of a pedestrian signal. If no pedestrian signal is provided, the cyclist should follow the signals for the parallel roadway traffic flow and cross on the green light. Every bicycle must be equipped with a brake or brakes that allow the rider to stop within 25 feet from a speed of 10 miles per hour on dry, level, clean pavement. A bicycle may not be used to carry more than the number of people for which it is designed or equipped. No riding double. An adult bicyclist may carry a child in a backpack or sling, a child seat, or trailer designed for carrying children. A bicycle rider or passenger under 16 years old must wear a bicycle helmet that is properly fitted, fastened securely, and meets nationally recognized standards. A cyclist may not wear a headset, headphone, or listening device other than a hearing aid while driving. Loud headphones can damage hearing and shut out the outside world. Now let's focus on motorists for a moment. They must yield to bicyclists in the same situations they would for other drivers. Motorists must know how to pass cyclists safely, how to properly turn in front of bicyclists, and how their speed affects bicyclists.
As law enforcement officers, we are very aware of the fundamental traffic laws regarding vehicles on the road. But there are some basic rules for sharing the road with cyclists that are just as important for us to know and to enforce. For instance, we all know this one.
The driver of a vehicle overtaking another vehicle that is proceeding in the same direction shall pass to the left thereof at a safe distance and shall not again drive to the right side of the road until safely clear of the overtaken vehicle. This applies whether the overtaken vehicle is a truck or a bicycle. So be prepared to ticket or warn motorists who pass cyclists dangerously close. Remember that the faster the motorist is traveling, the more passing separation he should allow. Here are some other basic rules of sharing the road. Both the approach for a right turn and the turn itself should be made as close as practicable to the right-hand curb or edge of roadway. For this reason, a motorist preparing to turn right should enter or closely approach a bicycle lane if one is present, after yielding to any cyclist already there. Approaching the right edge makes the motorist's intention more clear and prevents an overtaking cyclist who may not have been seen from trying to pass on the right and possibly colliding with the turning motor vehicle. A motorist who makes a sharp right turn immediately after passing a cyclist has turned incorrectly. The law requires that a driver check that he is not being approached or passed on the right before turning.
Failure to make this check causes about 4% of bicycle motor vehicle crashes. So, there are just a few key rules of the road that we must enforce to motorists and cyclists alike, even when the cyclist is a child.
Children very often overestimate their knowledge and strength and try to imitate older kids or adults. But they are not adults and often do not perceive any type of risks. Their field of vision is 33% less than adults. They see and hear differently and cannot tell where sounds are coming from. They have a low profile and often cannot see over cars and must peer around them. They are more spontaneous and unpredictable and tend to bicycle more erratically than adults. They are easily distracted and focus on what is of interest to them at the moment. They follow actions to completion, so it is difficult for them to stop if conditions become dangerous. They cannot judge distance or speed as well as adults. These are facts about children's behavior that motorists need to know and understand. Children who are not trained how to ride on the street will eventually learn from experience, but proper training can avoid costly mistakes. Without training, a child cyclist is likely to dart out of a driveway without looking for approaching traffic. This action is both dangerous and unlawful. Parents need to teach appropriate and lawful behavior, as well as basic balance and maneuvering skills to their children. But when they don't know the rules or fail to teach them, it is our duty to educate the public and enforce these rules of the road for the safety of young and old alike.
This is not a good thing.
A traffic stop is sometimes viewed as a punishment. In fact, it is an important opportunity to educate the public and improve safety by changing behavior. The purpose of traffic enforcement is to improve safety by increasing compliance with the traffic rules that apply to all. Because there is so little enforcement directed toward bicycling in most jurisdictions, even a small effort may have a big impact. Because this is so important to safety, here are some tips for ticketing. Make the stop as you would with any other vehicle. If the offender did not know the law, a verbal or written warning may be all that is needed to prevent future violations. Reassure offenders that officers also look for motorists who endanger cyclists by breaking traffic rules. Just like other offenders, some cycling offenders will challenge officers. By citing the specific law, you can be clear about the offense and avoid getting into a debate. Write the ticket or warning and explain that they have a right to contest the violation in court. If your agency has not done much bicycle traffic enforcement in the past, bicyclists may be upset or confused when you stop them. Remind them that they have the same responsibilities as motorists when driving on the roads, and they have the same right to be there as well. If you are suspicious as to an individual's identity and an ID is not presented, remember to ask for the information twice during the interview. Hesitation or slightly different information suggests false information. Check the signature on the ticket to see if it matches the name given. You can also separate groups of bicyclists and ask for each other's names to check if they match. One of the hardest parts of our job is attending to a crash scene. And if there are injuries or deaths, it can be emotionally wrenching and quite stressful. What makes it even more difficult is that this is the time when careful observing, questioning, and reporting are extremely important. It will help your report a great deal if you make some key observations about the cyclist, such as, if the crash occurred after sunset, was the bicycle equipped with the required headlamp, tail lamp, and rear reflector? Lack of these should be reported as defective, improper lights, and details of this need to be given in the narrative. If lamps were damaged in the crash, are the batteries charged? Was other reflective material used? Was a helmet worn? Helmet use should be reported as safety equipment on the crash form. Helmets are required for riders and passengers who are under 16 years old. Advise the cyclist to save all clothing and equipment involved in the crash and to refrain from repairing or cleaning any items until the case is closed. Also advise the cyclist to photograph all injuries for evidence. Was the cyclist in a bike lane? On some curbed roadways, a shoulder strip is separated by an edge line, but is not signed or marked as a bike lane. Legally, a bike lane is present only if the strip is designated with bike lane signs or markings. Remember, a cyclist on a highway is not required to drive on a paved shoulder. Also, be sure to inspect the bicycle. It should be held as evidence and, in the case of a fatality, only released when the case is closed. Now for the details regarding the motorist and the whole crash scene. Be sure to ask questions and make observations. What was the position of the sun? What was the time of day? What about the glare factor? Were there any surface hazards such as sand, glass, puddles, debris, potholes, railroad tracks, or irregular surfaces? Was there a loose dog in the area? Did any visual obstructions, such as trees, utility poles, etc., interfere with the cyclist's and motorist's view of each other? Did the motorist fail to scan for a cyclist approaching from the right on a sidewalk? Did the cyclist fail to maintain a speed appropriate for sight distance on the sidewalk? It is the duty of a motorist emerging from a driveway to scan the sidewalk as well as the street before proceeding, even though sidewalks are not ordinarily designed for bicycle speeds. Cyclists on sidewalks and crosswalks have the rights and duties of pedestrians, but are not required to dismount and walk their bicycles in crosswalks. Does the motorist say he didn't see the cyclist? If a motorist alleges that he did not see a cyclist in daylight where views were unrestricted, you should consider whether he was distracted or fatigued. You should also consider the possibility of drug or alcohol use. While injuries to bicyclists do not always involve motor vehicles, when attending the scene of such crashes, officers need to document what occurred. Sometimes, after a particularly grueling crash investigation, we law enforcement officers would give anything to be able to turn back time. We wish the crash had been avoided, if only the motorist had known the rules of sharing the road, if only the cyclist had understood his responsibility, then perhaps this awful scene would not have happened.
Well, every time you issue a warning or write a citation, you are making one more cyclist, one more motorist aware of the rules of the road, and you are perhaps changing that person's future, preventing an incapacitating injury, even avoiding an early death. This is a powerful responsibility and also a mighty good feeling to know that every day you are out there helping to make our roads better for everyone, creating a place where riding a bicycle can be as safe and American as apple pie.
One of the things that really works for me in my community with ticketing children is an example of an article in the paper that I took where a young girl lost her life due to a bike accident and she wasn't wearing her helmet, and the helmet would have saved her life. I took that article and stapled it to a ticket that I issued to one of the young kids in my community. And the parents, when they read it, they realized how important it was to instill in their children having a bike helmet on while they're riding their bike and not just looking at the ticket as a financial burden. So it made me feel like I was actually giving back, you know what I'm saying, to the community, where I let them realize how important it was to have bike helmets on.
If you only had one day in law enforcement, you'd know what these scenes are. If you wanted, you could take hours looking at different scenes, showing different responsibilities in police work, never repeat yourself, and it would all look familiar. The job's that diverse. But one responsibility, one scene is still relatively rare, and that's this one. Even though you know what it is, a person on a bike getting a ticket from an officer, you also know it doesn't look that familiar. You don't see that every day on the street. Probably because for many officers, it doesn't look that good either. The whole idea can go against your grain. It isn't just that you can almost hear that passing motorist thinking, pick on somebody your own size, or doesn't he have anything else better to do? But there's more to it than that. There are the other officers you work with, including supervisors who think the same thing, and you know it. It doesn't look good. And there's your own memory of having your own bike as a kid, and all that it meant to you, all the things you could make it do. You could go in, under, around, almost anything. Good times. You probably never got a ticket. You sure didn't expect one, because if there were rules, other than just be careful, they didn't apply to you and to your bike. So now, you don't like giving a kid a ticket for violating 49 sections of the vehicle code in 2 blocks. You're looking at her and you know she was told police officers help people, and here she is getting strangely punished in a way that may or may not mean anything to her by a person she doesn't know for something she does not understand. Put all this together, all these influences on you, add a few more of your own, and this becomes the familiar scene. He's riding on the wrong side of the street, you go right on by. He makes an illegal left turn in traffic, right on by. Runs a stop sign, right on by. That's the way police responded when you were a kid, and unless you see them nearly causing an accident, that's still pretty much the way it's going to be today. Unfortunately, as you know, the world has changed a little since you were a kid. In fact, no one knows better than an officer of the law. That where there used to be quiet streets, there are cars everywhere, more and more every day. Less room for bikers, less room for air. Then turn around and add more bikes because there are more kids and more people in general preferring bike riding to cars, a bike boom, and the game between bikes and cars starts to get a little dangerous. Primarily because one side, the bikes, one whole section of vehicular traffic is still pretty much allowed to operate outside the law, and they are suffering for it. In recent years, Florida's annual bicyclist fatality rate has been, on average, the highest in the country. Reviews of bicycle fatalities on state highways have found that bicyclists were at fault in about 70% of the cases. The child cyclist, who has no training and little information when they begin to ride, is at the biggest risk for making errors and for causing crashes. Most of the riders killed in Florida were not wearing helmets, which can prevent up to 80% of serious head injuries. About 60% of the crash victims were riding in non-daylight conditions, often without the required lights. Many of them were impaired by alcohol. Simply put, we have far too many bicycle crashes and fatalities in Florida when compared to other states. We have a lot of people on the roads, and proper roadway sharing, combined with informed vehicle users, should help greatly in crash prevention. For the most part, the cyclist who causes a crash gets hurt. Now, what's worse in all this is that the study also showed that children, kids 15 and under, who account for only 8% of the bicycle traffic, are involved in almost half of the crashes. And adult cyclists only add to the problem, since they, more likely than not, were the children that accidentally survived the same bad behaviors. Now, statistics are fine. They help make a point. This is what it looks like. There's no doubt it's getting more familiar. If last year you were called to a scene like this, you can bet this year you'll be called to 2, the next year 3, and the next year 4. You're going to have to take a report, determine cause, and you know what you'll find. He was on the wrong side of the street. He made an illegal left turn into traffic. He ran a stop sign or red light.
Did you know bicycles were vehicles, just like cars and trucks?
You talk to kids in schools, give safety tips, and the crashes continue to rise. You put on bike rodeos, explain the laws to everybody, and the crashes continue to rise. Now, obviously, education helps, everything helps, but the study again proved what you see every day for yourself. That even after bike riders know the rules of the road, they're going to violate them anyway because that's the way it's always been. The public in general permits it, and you permit it. Now, the state of Florida, based on the findings of the studies, can no longer in good conscience permit bike violations for the sole reason that it's directly related to this, and this is unacceptable. It's obvious that just as with pedestrians and cars, enforcement is still the only known effective means to stop accidents, and unless a person really believes there's still no problem, there is no other choice. However, just as bikes are not cars and children are not adults, it's also obvious that any enforcement program has to reflect those differences. You are aware that parents, not you, possess the only real influence over that child. You make the stop, talk about the violation, maybe give a warning or write a ticket. This is the area that law enforcement policies come into effect as to how the officer legally handles the offender. All this so they can understand in order to help. So that everybody can understand, of course, takes a campaign. The Florida Bicycle Association has created and implemented program materials, lots of them. The Florida Bicycle Law Enforcement Guide, the Florida Bicycling Street Smarts Riding Guide, the Florida Bicycle Messenger, and video and print media educational tools working to inform and educate, and that is just a beginning. Bike Florida is educating people through events such as their week-long bicycle touring ride and the Share the Road Rally and Summit. Revenue from these events supports the Florida Traffic and Bicycle Safety Education Program that teaches young cyclists how to be competent and predictable in traffic. Their regional training program focuses on training teachers at the local level to deliver traffic safety education to their students. Proceeds from the Share the Road specialty license plate are funding education and awareness programs for bicycle and motorist safety with emphasis on sharing the roadway by all users. An example of one of these programs is the Bike and Peds Driver's Ed video and manual. All this added up over time will help. And there are news releases explaining what's going to happen and why. Bike rodeos for sure, for bike training. Bike safety in schools for sure. But straight talk at all levels because even children have a right to know there's a good reason to be aware and alert in traffic. For the parents, TV ads and radio spots show clearly what's wrong, how it got this way, and what now has to be done. Public service programming, lectures, group discussions, all explaining not only the facts but also some of the thoughts of an officer in all this. These children are our future drivers, and this behavior, already unacceptable, will continue right into that first automobile. Adult bicyclists also need to know the rules of the road apply to them, just like other roadway users. Kids are watching them break the laws, risk injury, and in turn do the same risky acts. There are all kinds of reasons why an officer doesn't like giving a child a ticket, or any bicyclist a ticket, just as no one likes getting one. But the world's changed, you know it, the public is getting to know it, and in Florida, the bike riders are going to know it for their own safety. Unless, of course, the one person who's in a position to do something about crashes decides to go right on by.
The only way to prevent scenes like this is with your intervention. Just don't ride on by.